You know, $10 across Turkey, $10 across Iran, $10 across Pakistan, and $10 for the boat to Bombay from Karachi. You know, nothing on the deck of a boat and stuff like that. So these things were what I did. But on the way, I went and worked on kibbutzim, and they weren't doing that. And I met my family in Jerusalem, and lo and behold, they told me that my great-grandfather had come and settled in Jerusalem at the time of the Turks. I said, well, what? I mean, I had no idea. No one ever told me anything. What had happened in my family, and I'm telling you this because I don't usually tell people in this university these things, or in this class, because it sort of shows a predisposition to have a certain point of view. But I don't care anymore, I'm retiring. But so you guys should know it if you want to know. It's useful. But it relates to our subject here. I said, you have a great-grandfather. He's buried on the Mount of Olives. I said, oh, really? Are you kidding? And then they trucked out his picture. And they showed me his picture. Here was your picture of your great-grandfather. I said, whoa, how did he get here? Well, it turned out that they left Russia in the 1890s, just in the period we're talking about, of some of these groups that were in Tzedakah, Jerusalem sort of thing. He would be a Tzedakah Jew, not an agricultural Zionist Jew. And you know what the Arabs would call a curly with a big beard and the whole thing. You know. But in any case, he had 4 boys, and in Istanbul they split up, and the 2 oldest ones came to America, which was my father's father and his younger brother, who was very successful in the, you saw that movie Newsies. He was in the newspaper delivery business with a guy called Sarnoff, who later founded NBC, and they were very successful. So they all looked up to this younger brother guy, but my father's father was more like a yeshiva booker, you know. My father told me he wasn't long for this world as a person. In any case, the point being that the 2 younger brothers went with the grandfather's father, the 2 younger brothers to Jerusalem and settled as Tzedakah Jews at the time of the Turks in the 1890s, and I knew nothing about it. So the younger brothers were old enough to come to America, but the older brothers were old enough to come to America, but the younger brothers went with the father to Jerusalem, where they then had a family, and they were all involved in the mandate, and they were a known family in Jerusalem, and so on and so forth. And so I went up and saw, after the 6-Day War, I found my great-grandfather's grave on the Mount of Olives and stuff like that. And I refurbished it, et cetera, because the Arabs had thrown it all down and so on. They all buried on the Mount of Olives looking at the temple. The reason they were looking at the temple, they were waiting for the temple to be rebuilt and so on. That's why they were all on the Mount of Olives facing the Temple Mount. That's what Jesus was doing up there too, according, basically. So the temple, Mount of Olives is right opposite the temple. You can see the Temple Mount. In any case, I just want to tell you that my own great-grandfather was one of these Tzedakah Jews in Jerusalem. So that doesn't mean his offspring weren't like that. They were all secularized by that time. They were Orthodox in some ways, but they were all modern people. They really had been affected by the mandate. They loved the British. They loved British ways. They loved the whole deal. They just liked the modern world, and they were all very modern-looking people. And the father was like, for them, old-fashioned, though they had all. So yeah, I encountered my whole family in Jerusalem when I was just 23 years old, 22, 23, like some of you guys here. And that was really amazing to me. And no one had told me about it previously. Okay, that made for whatever it's worth. So you actually lived through some of these things and you were able to see them. Anyway, this is about my mother being from German Jewish background and Heinrich Heine, because the reason my father kept it all secret was because of my mother. He was ashamed of it. He didn't, he wasn't willing to talk about it. Yeah, imagine not telling your own children until they're 22 or 23 that your grandfather is in Jerusalem and was buried there, and that you have first cousins in Jerusalem and so on, and the brothers of your father and so on, 2 of them. I mean, it's just astonishing to me. So you see how deep-seated these divisions were. If you're really, I see it in my whole family. Anyway, So he was born in Bonn. Heine is a perfect example of, I love reading about Heine because it's so familiar to me from my mother's side of my background. Hess was born in Bonn, Germany, and etc. in 1821. And he's obviously an admirer of Spinoza, as we see from his first book, and so on. He's an intellectual sort of person. He didn't think much of his Jewish background at all, an assimilated person. 1848, you may not know, was a big revolutionary year in Europe, a lot of revolts in Hungary and different places, and mostly these were put down in Germany and other places, and the Communist Manifesto was written as a result of that. A lot of people were sentenced to death. It says here that even Hess was for his participation in those events at that time, and he, I'm sure he would have known Karl Marx personally or read him and so on, but he didn't like that approach. And apparently Marx made fun of him, according to this, in the Communist Manifesto. So he's sufficiently intellectual to have been remarked by Marx. In any case, he changed his mind somewhere along the way, and he had a restatement of his thought processes. And suddenly he became a very ardent nationalist, Jewish nationalist. And Rome and Jerusalem, again, 1862, is his statement, his famous statement on the, and this is a very thoughtful essay, so I'll take a little time going through it, okay? I assume you haven't read it, or if you did read it, you read it superficially, so we'll have to go through it bit by bit, and then you'll read it again, and then you'll know it. Okay, my way of return. After 20 years of estrangement, I've returned to my people. So you see, from the 1840s to the 1860s, he was trying the other way. And it's a little bit like Mendelssohn, a little bit like Herzl. And he says, the Jews have lived and labored among the nations for 2,000 years, almost 2,000. But nonetheless, they cannot become rooted organically within them. So he sees the same thing that Herzl will see 30 years later, 35 years later. And he mentions the Damascus blood libel. 20 years ago, when the news came to Europe from Damascus of the absurd accusation, the blood libel, using the blood, I don't know if it was Christians or Muslims that encouraged this. You'd have to look into it a bit. But it looks probably like it was from Muslims at this point.